Hello everyone. Over the past year or so, I have been working really hard to find some real mineral sunscreens that would look good and that would feel good on my mature and my sensitive skin. And what I found out about a year ago is that most of the so-called 100% mineral sunscreens that are on the market actually contain chemical sunscreen boosters, and these are basically exactly the same as the chemical sunscreens that have been approved, except they have never been submitted for regulatory approval. So for me, all of these chemical sunscreen boosters as well as chemical sunscreens do irritate my sensitive skin. And then in addition, if people are concerned about chemical sunscreens for health reasons, then there's not really any reason to believe that these chemical sunscreens would be any better because they are even less tested than the chemical sunscreens are. And when it comes to coral reefs, there's not any reason to believe that these are more safe for coral reefs than using chemical sunscreens. So for people that want to use chemical sunscreens, then I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But for people who are looking to avoid chemical sunscreens, then knowing that a lot of the products that are on the market that are called mineral sunscreens actually do contain these chemical sunscreens that are not regulated, that seems really important to me. And so what I would suggest is that for people who have decided that they want to avoid chemical sunscreens in their sunscreen products, that avoiding these chemical sunscreen boosters may also be important. And so the product names are butyloctyl salicylate, that one is very common, and tridecyl salicylate is another product that is very similar to butyloctyl salicylate. And then there is another product that is used often, which is called ethyl ferulate, and there are a few others as well. And if you look at the ingredient lists on most of the mineral sunscreens, most of them do have one of these three ingredients in them. But I have found more than 100 sunscreens that actually do not include any of these boosters, and I have been slowly trying them out to see how I do with them. And so far, most of these have been fine for my skin and haven't been irritating for me at all in the way that the regular sunscreens that contain the chemical sunscreen boosters or chemical sunscreens do. So I have been really happy about that, and I have made a list of well over 100 sunscreens that do not include these boosters, and so I am going to be sharing those with you in this video, and I also will just be talking about the ones that I have liked the most. So I picked out a dozen of them that I have had good experiences with myself so far and that I think that could be worth trying, so I will be talking about those in depth and showing you what they look like on my skin as well. And so it is my hope that if you are looking for a real mineral sunscreen, that one of the ones that I talk about in this video may work out well for you. And before we get started, I thought that I would bring up my new Facebook group. So for at least the time being, this is called 40 Plus Beauty with Lisa Petrison. And the goal of the group is to talk about not just makeup and skincare, but all other aspects related to maintaining a healthy and attractive appearance, including things such as clothing and hair and maintaining a healthy diet and keeping active and other kinds of issues that might be of interest to people of this particular age group. And so if you are interested in that, then I hope you will join me in that group. And I am moderating the group myself, and I have been really enjoying getting to know some of the people who are subscribers to this channel in that group. And also a little bit of information about me. So I am 60 years old and I do have dry and very sensitive skin. And so over the past several years, I have found that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my very sensitive skin. And I know that these ingredients, which include chemical sunscreens and sunscreen boosters, tend to be really irritating for many other people as well. And so I just don't talk about products that contain those ingredients on this channel. Now, as I say, I only learned about a year ago that these chemical sunscreen boosters were out there, and so my belief was that all sunscreens irritated my skin and I was not able to use them at all. But I did come up with some strategies that allowed me to spend some time in the sun without actually having any sunscreen, and that did prevent my skin not just from getting burned, but also from getting tanned in terms of my facial skin anyway. And so first of all, I do have a collection collection of really good hats that are SPF 50 and that have a wide brim. So this one, for instance, is from LL Bean, but most of the hats that I have are from a company called Sunday Afternoons, and I have been really happy with those. And so I have a pretty big collection at this point that I actually kind of enjoy wearing when I'm outside. And I do wear these whenever I am out in the sun, except in the middle of winter, even for a couple of minutes. And I do think that that's been really effective, and it is really important. And then in addition, whenever I am outside, I do wear sunglasses. So a lot of the time I'm wearing just regular prescription sunglasses. But in addition, almost all of the glasses that I have are transitions. And so when I am outside, they do automatically darken. And I think that that's really important, and maybe even more important than protecting my skin, because I am concerned about getting, for instance, cataracts. And I do think that it's pretty clear from the literature that UV light does cause cataracts, and I really don't want to get any surgery of any kind, even though cataract surgery is a little safer now than it used to be. And so therefore the wearing sunglasses, as well as the hat, has been really important for me with regard to my eye health. And then in addition, I live here in the upper Midwest, and so during the spring and summer and fall, it sometimes does get to be a UV level during the middle of the day, which is, 7 or 8, and so really too high to go out in, even with my hat on. But what I tend to do is that when I go and spend actual time in the sun with my dog, such as walking my dog for an hour or two per day, I do that almost always in the early morning or the evening hours when the UV levels are around 3 or below. And so when the UV levels are that low, then it is less important to be wearing an actual sunscreen, particularly if I have my hat and my sunglasses on. Now, of course, now I have the ability to wear sunscreen, and so I am really happy about that. And so that does provide me with some more protection if I am going to be out in the middle of the day, and if I go on vacation somewhere, then that does provide some more UV protection if I want to be out and about more during the middle of the day. But in general, I have not changed my sun protection strategies at all since I have been able to wear sunscreen, and I more view sunscreen as something to add to the mix of things that I am using in order to give me additional protection, rather than something that I am substituting and as an excuse to spend more time in the sun. I'm just not doing that at all. And in addition, I have spent quite a bit of time actually learning about sun protection and UV light and about skin health in general by reading journal articles and other types of articles about this. And so I thought that I would just share a little bit of information about that in case people are interested. But if you want to just hear about my feelings about some particular sunscreens that I think could be worth trying, then you can go ahead and skip to that information in the timestamps. And so let's talk first about UV light and about UVA versus UVB light. And although this seems like it may be kind of theoretical, I do think it's really important in terms of deciding what kind of sun protection to use. And so UVB light is most known as being the kind of UV light that can make the skin burn. So this is a shorter wavelength light, and it doesn't penetrate as far into the skin, but if you get enough of it, then it definitely can make your skin very burnt. And getting a sunburn seems to be something that you do want to avoid, and that can have really bad consequences for well into your life. And so, for instance, having even one sunburn at any point in your life that is particularly bad can actually increase the chance of melanoma, supposedly. And in addition, sunburns or just UVB light in general can be associated with other kinds of skin cancer that tend not to be quite as dangerous, such as basal cell or squamous cell cancer. And while UVB light may be necessary for tanning, this is not the main reason that people get tanned is because of the UVB light. This is more of a UVA light phenomenon. And most chemical sunscreens do protect pretty well against UVB light, and also mineral sunscreens do protect pretty well against UVB light. And then the other kind of UV light is UVA, And this is a longer wavelength, and this is one that penetrates much more deeply into the skin. And so even though it is not as much associated with burning, it is associated with tanning, but it's also associated with skin damage, and particularly with skin aging, and supposedly it is more associated with skin aging than UVB. And in addition, it is associated with different kinds of skin cancer, apparently especially melanoma. And the thing about UVA that I think is really important is that mineral sunscreens do provide quite a bit of protection against UVA, but when it comes to other kinds of chemical sunscreens, including the sunscreen boosters, very few of them, at least the ones that are available in the U.S., provide any significant protection against UVA at all. And so that is something that is really important, at least to me, because I feel that for me, I'm most concerned about skin aging and then even more so melanoma. And so insofar as I'm just using chemical sunscreens, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere near optimal protection of my skin from the UVA rays, and that is something that I'm really concerned about. And so when we're talking about chemical sunscreens, I think that primarily we're talking about cosmetically elegant products or products that people really enjoy using because they are not as thick, they may not have as much of a white cast, and they may not necessarily feel that much different than putting moisturizer on your skin. And so for that reason, some people do prefer those. And then, as I said, chemical sunscreens tend to, at least in the United States, have a lot of protective ability against UVB. And so therefore, if your concern is that you don't want to get burned, then this could be something to consider because you're going to be mostly protected from this sunscreen from getting burned. Now, in terms of the downsides of chemical sunscreens, first of all, of course, they can be irritating. And one thing that I will say about irritation is that having your skin be irritated seems to have the same kinds of negative effects on it as exposure to sun. And so therefore, if your skin is chronically irritated by a particular product, then this is also going to increase the risk of premature aging, as well as skin cancers of various kinds, including melanoma. And so I don't think that it is a good idea to say that you are going to allow your skin to be irritated in the service of protecting it from the sun, because the irritation itself is also problematic. And then other things that people are concerned about with regard to chemical sunscreens, as I say, they are absorbed into the body. And so there are question marks about whether or not it is safe for the products to be absorbed into the body. And I don't think that this has been studied all that much, which is why the FDA in the United States has said that they don't really have a lot of confidence that any of the chemical sunscreens that are available are safe. They are not saying that they're not safe. They're just saying that they are not tested as being safe to the extent that they would want there to be testing of any particular drug that they were evaluating. And then in addition, it seems that chemical sunscreens have the potential of being problematic for coral reefs. And so if you are going to be swimming somewhere where that could be an issue, then that could be a problem. And although only some kinds of chemical sunscreens are banned in Hawaii, I am getting the feeling from looking at the literature and how people are talking about this that it's actually the case that really none of the chemical sunscreens are probably appropriate for use there. And also that mineral sunscreens that include nanoparticles are not probably very safe for use there either if we're trying to protect coral reefs. Now, the other thing to know about the UVB protection is how people tend to think about sunscreens. And what I think a lot of people think is that if they put their sunscreen on and if they don't get burned, then the sunscreen is working, and then that is all that they need to be worrying about. And I think that if we consider UVA to be just as problematic or potentially more problematic than UVB, then that may not be a good way to look at it, because you may end up spending an awfully lot of time in the sun and getting an awfully lot of exposure to UVA, which could be especially problematic when it comes to premature aging. if you are wearing something that's protecting you from getting burned. And then when we're talking about mineral sunscreens, a major advantage of those seems to be that from a safety perspective, at least if we're talking about the non-nano versions, people seem to think that these are pretty safe, or at least considerably more safe than the chemical ones. And so there doesn't seem to be as much irritation associated with them. And personally, I do feel like my skin has not been irritated by sunscreens that contain titanium dioxide or zinc oxide, as long as there's not something else in them. And the FDA does seem to think that both zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are safe sunscreens. And when it comes to coral reefs, it seems that non-nano versions of zinc oxide and titanium dioxide seem to be okay for people to use when they are swimming in areas where there are coral reefs. Now, the negative of the pure mineral sunscreens has historically been that they have not been very attractive, and that they have been thick, and that they haven't felt very good on the skin, and that they haven't looked very good on the skin. And so that is something that makes people not as interested in wearing them. I do think that this has changed quite a lot as the years have gone on, and even over the past year or so, there has been, for instance, a new form of zinc oxide that is not a nanoparticle, but that is much more attractive when you use it, and that does go on much more sheerly, and that doesn't have as much of a white cast. And so I do think that there have been a lot of positive things that have happened with regard to mineral sunscreens that make a lot of the formulas much better to be wearing than they were in the past. And if we're talking about the versions with the nanoparticles in them, either the nano zinc or the nano titanium dioxide, then those may be even more attractive to wear, and they may have less of a white cast and go on smoothly and feel almost like a chemical sunscreen. And I have not found those to be irritating for me. I don't know if other people have found that to be the case. I'd be interested in hearing what other people have said. But personally, I seem to be able to tolerate the nano versions okay. Now, there is a sense that they may be absorbed into the skin, and so the question is it okay to be having particularly the titanium dioxide absorbed into the skin? My feeling is that actually when I use the nano zinc versions, that I can actually taste the zinc more than I can if I am using a non-nano version. And so I do think that there is some absorption, and I don't know if that is a problem or not, but my skin is not irritated by those, and so I am not entirely unwilling to use those, or certainly I'm not unwilling to try them out for this channel. And a couple of the versions that I am suggesting might be good alternatives for people to try do have nanoparticles in them. And then the third category is hybrid sunscreen. So this includes a combination of mineral sunscreen and chemical sunscreen. And it's my belief that most of the mineral sunscreens that are out there actually are hybrids, because they do have these sunscreen boosters in them. And I think that would be fine if they were admitting that rather than trying to cover it up. So with regard to the positives of a hybrid sunscreen, what it basically is a mineral sunscreen where you're, in most cases, getting a good extra dose of some UVB protection. And so therefore the benefit of that is, particularly if you are concerned about getting burned, then you may have some additional protection from that. Now, one thing to keep in mind with these hybrid sunscreens is that it may be hard to know what percentage of the protection that you're getting is from the minerals versus the chemical, or from the chemical sunscreen boosters, because they're not listing the amount of the protection that's from the chemical sunscreen boosters. And so what they're usually doing is they're taking a sunscreen that would be a mineral sunscreen and that would have, for instance, a protective level of SPF 30, and then they add these boosters to them, and so they jack it up to something like SPF 50. And while that sounds like it's a good thing, it can be a negative thing for a couple reasons. For one thing, they may take out some of the mineral sunscreen and just put a lot of the boosters in there, and so you may actually be getting less protection from UVA than you would if you didn't have any of the boosters in there, and therefore you may end up getting premature skin aging or other negative effects from the UVA exposure. Now, another question with regard to sunscreen use is whether or not sun actually can be beneficial for people. And when I looked into the literature, there is quite a bit of discussion at this point suggesting that sunlight actually has a lot of benefits to the body in general, and that even though sunlight can be hazardous for the skin, that the reason that, for instance, people from darker countries are evolved to have lighter skin, which lets a lot more of the sun into the body, is because it actually is a beneficial thing. And it often is discussed as being just a vitamin D issue. And so if we look at vitamin D levels, they do tend to be very highly correlated with how healthy people are with regard to things like cardiovascular health. But it is interesting that in most of the cases that giving vitamin D supplements only is of limited benefit and that it's really not helping that much. And what people are suggesting now, and I think the people that are suggesting this do have a lot of credibility behind them, is that vitamin D is not really the issue here, and what vitamin D is just a convenient marker to suggest whether or not you've gotten enough sun exposure. And that if you've gotten enough sun exposure, yes, it does raise the vitamin D, but that it does other positive things for the body. And so one of the positive things that it does for the body apparently is to increase the levels of nitric oxide, and that the levels of nitric oxide tend to be pretty highly correlated with the levels of cardiovascular health. And so, for instance, if you look at people that are in Australia, they tend to have much, much better cardiovascular health than, for instance, people that are in Scotland. And even if you try to remove all of the known other kinds of measures with regard to cardiovascular health, like things like diet or exercise, then nonetheless there is a really big difference in terms of the amount of sunlight that you're getting. And so I've been particularly interested in listening to the thoughts on this matter by a researcher named Richard Weller, who is associated with the University of Edinburgh. And then there are some other kinds of benefits that have been associated strongly with getting sun exposure. And so, for instance, if we're talking about mood or immune function or blood circulation, things like that, those also seem to be very positively associated with getting more sun exposure. And so I do think it's important to keep that in mind and to keep the idea that staying out of the sun entirely is probably not going to be a good idea, and to question whether or not people are getting enough sun versus not enough sun before we start to think about whether or not we should be putting on sunscreen to make them get less than they're already getting. And so if we're talking about people that are living in pretty dark places, then this is particularly an issue. So it makes sense to me that a researcher from Scotland would be talking about this because it does get pretty dark in Scotland during the winter. And even here in the upper Midwest, it gets pretty dark. And if we get to somewhere like Alaska, then you tend to get hardly any sun at all in the winter. And then in addition, if we're talking about people with dark skin, then that is another issue that seems to be particularly problematic. And it does seem to be the case that having dark skin and living in northern climates seems to be especially associated with cardiovascular issues, whereas having dark skin and living in really sunny climates seems to have much less of an effect. And of course, there are other confounding variables, but nonetheless, it really does seem to be the case that for a lot of people, if you are mismatched to your environment based on where you are evolved to be living, that can present some problems. And so if you have really light skin and freckles and you move to a really sunny place in Africa, then that's going to be problematic in terms of your skin getting burned a lot. But it also does seem to be the case that for people with really dark skin, if they are living in an area where they're not getting as much sunlight, that can be a different problem that is more problematic for their health as a whole. Now, of course, no matter how dark your skin is, it's not going to provide 100% protection against the sun, and it's not like the more sun that you get, the better. And so, for instance, if you are Venus or Serena Williams and you are playing tennis for many hours a day in the hot Florida sun, then probably some sun protection would be a good idea. And so I do think that it makes sense that both of those two women have released sunscreens as part of their own personal care lines. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because I do think that there is some potential relevance in terms of how people may make decisions with regard to how to wear sunscreen and when to wear sunscreen. And so what I tend to hear the most in the beauty community or on YouTube and other places is that everyone really needs to be wearing sunscreen every day. And that the way that people tend to suggest applying it is to put it on at the beginning of the day under whatever other kind of makeup you are wearing, and not to vary that based on what time of year it is, or where you are living, or where you are visiting, or how dark your skin is, or whether or not you plan to be out in the sun at all. Now, on the other hand, if we listen to people that I consider to be experts in this topic, which are researchers that have focused on it and are widely respected, they are not really suggesting using that type of approach at all. And they tend to be suggesting using a much more nuanced approach that varies on a day-to-day basis and not using the same amount of sunscreen every day, as if getting in the habit is going to be the solution. So, for instance, if we look at a researcher whose name is Brian Diffie, who is from the UK and who is really widely respected as being really important, he has stated very clearly that he doesn't think that putting sunscreen on every day is a good idea from a couple of different perspectives. So, first of all, if you put on sunscreen and you do not need it because you're not getting that much sun exposure, then you are not going to be getting the benefits of the sun. And until the past year or so, it was kind of assumed, I think, that it was just the vitamin D that you were not going to be getting. And then people that are concerned mostly about aging would say, well, I'm taking lots of vitamin D, so I don't need to worry about that. But if we now accept the idea that it's not just that the vitamin D is the issue and that the vitamin D is just a marker of whether or not you've been getting enough sun, and that supplementing with vitamin D is not really solving the problem, then I think that this changes a lot. And so even if you take some vitamin D and it does help some things, it may not be helping the things that are really important. And if it is the case that people that have dark skin are not getting enough sun exposure when they are living in climates that they are not evolved to be living in, then it probably would not be the greatest idea for those people to be using sunscreens, maybe even in the summer. It's not really clear. And so I do think that it would be great if we could do some more research into those types of issues and to figure out, based on skin darkness, what kind of amount of sun would be appropriate, because it does seem to be the case that even if you are getting an hour of sun exposure that is UV3 or lower, probably if you have dark skin, that's not going to be enough for you to be able to acquire the kinds of benefits that the sun can provide. And the other problem that I see and that I've heard other people talk about from putting sunscreen on at the beginning of every day underneath your makeup, whether you need it or not, is that the argument is that you're going to get into the habit of using sunscreen and that is a good thing. And what my argument would be, and what I think other people are arguing also, is that getting into a habit like that is actually a bad thing. And it's not just bad because on some days that you may be not getting enough sunlight. It's also a bad thing because on the days that you actually are getting a lot of light, that you may not be getting enough protection on those days. Because if you're putting on a sunscreen at the beginning of every day underneath your makeup, then first of all, if you're going to put on a lot of it that is going to protect you from the sun, then you probably are not going to want to wear that every day because it may be uncomfortable. And so therefore you may either use less of the product than you actually need to protect yourself from the sun. And also it may be the case that you end up using a product that works for you and that you can tolerate and that you can stand, but that is really not that appropriate in terms of actually protecting your skin from high dosage UV exposures because, for instance, it's only protecting from UVB. And then the other issue is that if you're planning to put it on underneath a foundation, you're probably not going to be applying it in the way that is instructed. So you may not be using as much of it because it doesn't work very well under your foundation. And the way that the researchers such as Brian Diffie suggest putting it on is that you should not be rubbing it in. You should be leaving it more on the surface of the skin so that it's more providing like a barrier, and that you should let it soak in and then like put another layer on later on. And so therefore, if you're using it in conjunction every day with whatever other makeup you may be putting on, then on the days that you really need it, you may not have enough on to actually be protecting your skin. And in addition, you may feel that, oh, I am protected. I put it on just like I do every day, so I don't have to worry about going out in the sun. And therefore, you may not be reapplying it every 2 hours. And you may be thinking that you can spend more time in the sun than you actually can. And you may be neglecting wearing a hat or staying in shade. So just some general summary thoughts. I think that avoiding getting burned when in the sun is job number one. I think that any kind of sunburn is really, really bad and can have really long-term negative effects in a wide variety of ways, some of which can be really catastrophic. And so I think that if you are going to be getting burned when you're outside, that you should be doing everything possible to keep that from happening. And I also think that it is pretty commonly accepted that using a multifaceted approach to protecting yourself from the sun makes the most sense, and that altering this based on what the conditions are also makes a lot of sense. And so therefore, if you are just relying on sunscreen, that is probably going to be highly suboptimal, and that rather a combination of using a really good hat, which is probably not going to be a baseball cap, but rather one with a wide brim that goes all around, and also that trying to seek out shade and spending hours in the day that are less sunny when possible. All of those things are really important, and for me, sunglasses seem to be especially important. And thinking that you can just put on sunscreen at the beginning of the day underneath your makeup and then forget about it, that seems to be a highly suboptimal strategy, regardless of whether you get burned or not. And another thing that I think is personally important for me is that retinol can make people much more sensitive to the sun, and so therefore the instruction is always that people should be using more sun protecting lotion. But for me, my feeling is that I really don't need to be using retinol, and I am not unhappy with how my face is looking. And everyone says that everyone over 50 should be using retinol, but I feel like I am doing just fine with it, and that the retinol would cause my face to be irritated, and in addition, it would cause my face to be more sensitive to the sun, and that is not what I need, and so therefore I am just skipping that. So I do think that if you are using retinol, that may mean that it is important for you to be more careful with regard to the sun. And in addition, I am really concerned about cataracts, and I feel like very recently I have gotten some like cloudiness in my vision that has shown up at some points, and I have felt like there is a supplement that I have started to take that has made a really big difference and quite quickly in that, which was astaxanthin. And so I found out actually that astaxanthin is actually a really good supplement in terms of protecting from the sun in general. And so I feel like there is a benefit with regard to that, as well as possibly with regard to cataracts. And so that is something that I've done. But I think also the sunglasses are really important to me, and the hat is really important to me. And obviously sunscreen has nothing to do with how protected your eyes are from the sun. And another thing that does seem to be starting to become more clear is that certain kinds of dietary interventions may make a difference in terms of how likely your skin is to be negatively affected by the sun. So as I say, the astaxanthin, then that seems to be a really important supplement that can make your skin potentially less reactive in terms of getting burnt or less reactive in terms of getting injured. And I don't think that that is a substitute for using any other kind of sun protective measures, but I do feel like that is one good reason to keep taking it for me, especially since I feel like it has already been helpful for my eyes. And then in addition, more omega-3 and less omega-6, or more of a ratio towards omega-3 is supposed to be a good thing. And in my diet, I am really careful to be only eating really, really high-quality meat that is locally grown and pastured, and I really almost never am eating anything in restaurants or any kind of processed type meats, and no seed oils, and I do have some olive oil from time to time, and so I think that that is really important. And then supposedly antioxidants are really important, and especially during the summer months, but also to some extent during the winter months, I am eating really massive amounts of produce. And so I think that especially during the summer when I am getting more sun exposure, having all of that produce in my diet is probably a good thing. And then one other thing that I have learned is that alcohol can be bad in terms of making people more likely to get burned, and that this can be due to dehydration, and then may also be due to things like destruction of antioxidants or inflammation or other reasons. And so probably for people that are planning to spend a lot of time in the sun, not drinking alcohol during that time is probably a good idea. And that is something that I tend to not do at the same time if I do drink alcohol. And I would suggest that for people with dark skin that we really need to have better research, and that we shouldn't be assuming that people that have dark skin should be pursuing the same sort of sun protection strategy as people with lighter skin. There does seem to be a significant difference there. And so now let's talk about specific sunscreens. And so first, I have made a list of all of the sunscreens that I've looked at the ingredient list for, and they are divided up based on whether or not they are actual real mineral sunscreens that do not have any boosters in them versus ones that do have boosters. So let's start out with the ones that are calling themselves mineral sunscreens but that do have boosters in them. So we have some here that have butyloctyl salicylate in them. This is by far the most popular chemical sunscreen booster that is out there. And there are a lot of makeup products that do have the butyloctyl salicylate in them. And then in addition, I have some sunscreen products that have butyloctyl salicylate in them. And then tridecyl salicylate, as I say, this is almost the same from a chemical standpoint as both butyloctyl salicylate and also octisalate. And it seems to me that a lot of the really more expensive products have the tridecyl salicylate in them, but in reality, in terms of all of the relevant issues, this is really no different than the butyloctyl salicylate. And then another sunscreen booster is ethyl ferulate. This one may be slightly more protective against some lengths of UVA, but it's really just primarily, again, a UVB protectant. And then there's one more chemical sunscreen booster that I had actually never seen in a product until this year, and this is called ethyl hexyl methoxycrylene. And so this has a structure that is similar to a approved chemical sunscreen that is called octocrylene. And so I have not tried that one yet, but I would imagine that this is just as irritating to me as all of the other sunscreens that I've tried. And then there is one more sunscreen, which is called DESM. And this one I'm not sure about, because although it is a chemical sunscreen booster, it seems to have a different chemical structure than most of the other chemical sunscreens that are on the market, and it is only in a few products. And so I'm not sure what to think about that one, and I think that it would be interesting for me to try that a bit more to see if it actually is irritating. And then another form of chemical sunscreen boosters that I have seen this year are ones that are actually approved chemical sunscreens in other countries. And so apparently some of these are being added to mineral sunscreens in this country, and that they are still being called mineral sunscreens, even though they have these official chemical sunscreens from other countries in them. And so, for instance, there is a YouTuber named Angie Hot and Flashy who does a sunscreen video every year. And in this year's video, which is supposed to be mineral sunscreens, she did bring up a couple of products that are called mineral sunscreens, but that do have these approved chemical sunscreens from other countries in them. So this seems to be what's happening with, for instance, a lot of the Korean products these days. And then finally, we do have a number of pages of sunscreens that I have read all the ingredient lists for all of them, and that I haven't found any sunscreen boosters in any of these. So I am really happy that there are quite a few of these. And so I have divided these up by type. And so while I'm showing you these slides, I thought that I would talk a little bit about the amount of sunscreen that is needed in order to get the SPF that is on the bottle. And so I was just listening to that podcast interview with, again, Brian Diffie, and he brought this up as the idea that suggesting that everybody needs to put a quarter teaspoon of sunscreen on their face every day is sort of unrealistic, and that most people are not going to do that, and that generally speaking, when people put the amount of sunscreen on their face that they feel like they are willing to use, it's usually about half that, and so they may or may not be getting half the SPF depending on how spreadable the sunscreen is. But that nonetheless, that encouraging people that they are supposed to be using that amount may be more likely to encourage them to not use it at all because it seems unrealistic. And in addition, it also is the case that the quarter teaspoon is just an estimation anyway, because what it really is supposed to be is 2 milligrams per square centimeter. And so on average, a person that is the average adult would be a quarter teaspoon. But for women, women have faces that are on average 20% smaller than men. And so therefore they may not need to use as much on average. And if you're talking about someone like me, and I do have a very small face and a very small head and can wear like children's hats, I think that the amount that I need to use in order to cover my face to 2 milligrams per square centimeter is substantially less than a lot of people. And so I think that putting on the amount of sunscreen that you can stand is probably a good idea, and then reapplying it as necessary and not relying that on as being your number one form of sun protection. And really just try not to spend so much time in the sun. If you're in a place where you are on holiday, I don't think that sitting on the beach all day is probably the greatest strategy, particularly if you're not used to being in the sun, because that is a good way to get sunburned, and that is really what you don't want, is to be sunburned. And then I put together a couple more charts that just talk about the dozen sunscreens that I'm going to be discussing in this video. And so in the first chart, I list the SPF for each of the products, and I also list whether or not it includes titanium dioxide or not, and all of these products do include zinc. And then I also included whether or not the zinc that is in the product is a nano zinc or not. And then I also listed whether or not these particular formulas include substantial amounts of silicones. And then on the next page, I did a cost analysis, so I listed the cost of each product in terms of the full bottle, and I listed the amount of product that is in the bottle, and then I calculated how much it would cost for each application if you were to use 1/4 teaspoon. And so in terms of that cost per application, it ranged from 23 cents to $2.34. And then I thought that I would talk a little bit about a couple of other more prominent YouTube creators and their lists of mineral sunscreens that they tried out. And so the first one is Angie Hot and Flashy, and she does a mineral sunscreen review every year. And this year she did mention that some of the ones that she had listed as being mineral sunscreens contain butyloctyl salicylate in them. And that is good that she did bring that up. It also is the case that some of the other sunscreens that she mentioned have other sunscreen boosters in them other than butyloctyl salicylate. So if you are looking for a hybrid sunscreen sunscreen, then some of the ones that Angie Hot and Flashy recommended this year might be of interest to you. Of the ones that she tested for the first time this year, 6 of them have only mineral sunscreens in them, and so those could be ones to consider trying. And then in addition, of the 2 favorite sunscreens that she says are her favorites of all time, both of those actually are real mineral sunscreens, and so those could be ones to consider trying as well. And I did try one of those myself, and I'm going to be discussing that one in this video. And then Jen Phelps is another YouTuber whose channel I tend to really like. And so last year she tried out 30 mineral sunscreens. She said that she was really motivated to find some good ones because she had had skin cancer in the past. And she brought up in the video that she found out halfway through her experiment that some of those sunscreens do have butyloctyl salicylate in them, and that is a chemical sunscreen. So I was happy she brought that up. And then I did point out in the comments that some of the others that she brought up actually had some other kinds of chemical sunscreen boosters in them, and she seemed to be appreciative of my bringing that up. And so of the 30 sunscreens that Jen tried out, 12 of them actually do just include mineral sunscreens and no sunscreen boosters. And so for those who are just interested in mineral sunscreens, it is good that she did find some that worked for her. And what she did say is that of the 3 products that she liked the most, that all 3 of those did not include any chemical sunscreen boosters in them. And I did try out all 3 of those, and I did like all 3 of them myself, and so I'll be talking about all 3 of those in this video as well. And so now let's move on and talk about the 12 sunscreens that I have tried out and that are real mineral sunscreens and that I would consider wearing myself and that I think that other people might consider as well. And so the first one is from Badger, and the one that I picked up is the Sport Mineral Sunscreen Cream Broad Spectrum SPF 40. And this is supposed to be water resistant for 60 minutes. It says reef friendly, certified to protect land and sea, and that it has 98% organic ingredients, including clear zinc. And so this is $16 for this container. And so in terms of the cost per teaspoon, this is actually, I think, the least expensive one that I tried out, and it is 23 cents per quarter teaspoon. And what it says on the label is that the active ingredient is uncoated mineral zinc oxide 23%. In terms of the uncoated part, that means that it doesn't have silicone coating each of the particles to keep it from sticking together, I guess. And in terms of the other thing about the zinc, it does not have nanoparticles in it. It is not a nano zinc. And the other ingredients in this particular version of this Badger product are organic sunflower oil, organic beeswax, and sunflower vitamin E. Now, some of the other Badger formulas have other kinds of oils in them, such as coconut oil, and a few of them have organic essential oils. I think like the kids version has some orange oil in it, so it smells like a creamsicle. But this version does not have any scent in it or any scent ingredients. And in terms of people who have liked this product, one of them is Dr. Yvonne Burkhardt, who is a toxicologist who has a YouTube channel. And so she liked this particular Badger product and recommended it, although she was talking about the kids' version that has that creamsicle flavor in it. And I would say that the main reason that I decided to try this product is because I had a number of people that I knew suggested to me as being the product that they use. And these tend to be people that are especially chemically sensitive, and some of these are people that do not have a lot of extra money to be spending on personal care type products, and so therefore they found this one to work out for them. And so I thought that this one would be a good one to test. And so I did try out this product on both my face and on my body. And my first thing that I noticed about this product is that it does tend to be very, very thick, and it tends to actually be rather difficult to get out of the tube. And I really have to take the whole lid off of here and then squeeze it really hard to get any out of here. And so I think that that can be annoying for some people. It also does seem to be quite greasy, and so this is certainly not a product I would want to wear under makeup, and I really wouldn't wear this at all unless I really felt like it was needed in order to give my face sun protection, and if my face was likely to be getting burned if I wasn't using it, and this is what I had available. But I will say that this product was usable on my face. I don't think it made my face break out. I don't think that it was irritating to my face. And so even though my face was quite greasy and also quite white when I was using it, and I do have light skin, I still think that it was probably effective in terms of protecting my face from the sun, and it didn't cause irritation, and I do think that it would be wearable, and so that is an achievement. In terms of my personal use, I think that this product is one that I actually may use on my arms when I am outside, because I think that on my arms it is fine and it's something that I would wash off at the end of the day. But I don't think that having some actual greasiness or a little bit of a white cast on my arms bothers me as much as it does when I put stuff like that on my face. And so all in all, I can see why people like this, and I do think that it has some potential, and I'm going to keep this around, and I do see myself using it, but just as a body sunscreen. And I would actually say that of all of the products that I'm talking about today, this one is probably one of the least irritating ones of all. So there are a few here that have caused a little bit of irritation, but that I feel like they may be usable anyway as kind of a workaround, whereas this one has been fine. I haven't had any irritation with regard to either my eyes or my skin. And then the next product is from Biossance, and Biossance is actually a company that I do kind of like in terms of their skincare products, and so they make a couple moisturizers that I like. They make a squalane oil that is reasonably priced that has been fine for me, and I do really like their hand cream, and they make a body lotion that I really like. So overall, I think this has been a good company for me. This is a company that was originally founded with some money from Bill Gates, and so that is why it is called Biossance, because it is made from bioengineered microbes that convert sugarcane into squalane oil. And that made me a little bit nervous at first, but I feel like all of these products have been fine for me, and they have not been irritating. And so I think that this sunscreen was released last year, and this is called the Biossance Squalane plus Zinc Sunscreen SPF 30, and it is $32, and it includes non-nano zinc, they say, 18%. And then in addition, the other ingredients that are in here, it includes squalane, as they say. It includes some coconut oil derivatives, ectoin, bisabolol, and cranberry seed oil. So I feel like the ingredients that are in here that are moisturizing, that these are kind of higher quality ingredients that my skin has done well with regard to other Biossance products, and that this one has been good for me also. And it's made in the United States. And although it says that this tube is $32, there's a price drop that was listed on the website as being $24. And then there's also a 100 milliliter size that is regularly $64. And when I looked on the website, it was priced at $36. So I don't know how long that is going to last. But if we are talking about the price for this tube at the full price, then the cost would be for 1/4 teaspoon, about 80 cents, which is fairly typical for this quality of sunscreen, I think. And of people that I have seen that have really liked this sunscreen are the dermatologists that are on the YouTube channel called Dr. Lee. And so they brought this up last year, and one of them, Dr. Maxfield, said, "I am wildly impressed with this sunscreen." And usually they are talking about only chemical sunscreens or sometimes mineral sunscreens with sunscreen boosters in them, but they did really like this one, and then they brought it up again this year. And the thing that they seem to be most impressed with about this product is that it is an untinted product, but that nonetheless it blended in really easily to their skin with no white cast. And so far, this seems to be mostly just available on the Biossance website. And when I looked on the website at the negative reviews, the things that I saw that people brought up is that some people did say that it had a white cast. I wonder if those are people with darker skin tones. Some people said that they experienced some pilling or said that it was not working very well with their other skincare or with makeup. And a few people said that they thought that this was overly thick or drying. And I did find one or maybe two people that said that they thought that this stung their eyes. And my own experience with this is that I did really like the formula in terms of the creaminess of it. It did feel like it was really good quality oils on my skin and that my skin seemed to like it for that reason. And so that is really important to me. I think that there was a white cast for me. I did feel like my skin looked more pale when I used it. I know that some people do not think that it's a good idea to mix anything into a sunscreen. And so I am a little bit hesitant to use a product mixed into it to try to darken it up a little bit. Otherwise, I would probably think about mixing it with, for instance, this Westman Atelier bronzer just to see if it could be a little bit less white on my skin. But it wasn't a problem, and I feel like if I just use a little bit of powder bronzer over the top of it, that works equally well probably. And I don't think that it was irritating to my eyes. I didn't feel like that was the case with this one, so for me at least it was okay. And I think that it doesn't really exacerbate the look of my wrinkles too much and that it is wearable on my skin and it seemed to dry down fairly easily. So in terms of wearability on my own fair skin, I think that it was quite nice and I feel like I'm okay about wearing this again and that I will use this as one of my favorite options of things that I'm willing to wear on my face in the summertime. And in terms of the scent, I think it does have a little bit of a scent that I would describe as being typical sunscreen scent, but it is very faint, and I don't feel like it is a problem at all, and I don't feel like this was irritating for my skin at all. I think it was okay. It may not have been quite as good as, for instance, the Badger one in terms of not being irritating, but I think that this is perfectly acceptable as things I can put on my face go. And then the next product is from a small company that is called Blissoma, and the name of this product is the Blissoma Photonic Sunscreen SPF 30, and it is $68. And there is 1.2 ounces in this container, so this is a little bit less product than most of the sunscreens have in it. And as a result, in terms of the cost per quarter teaspoon, this is the most expensive product that I have used, and the cost is $2.34. And what I will say about this product is that of the ingredients that are on the label, I am really impressed with these ingredients, and I do think that that makes me feel like this is a really quality product and explains why it is quite so expensive. And so some of the things that it includes are blackberry seed oil, sesame oil, niacinamide, and 2 different kinds of fermented ingredients, and those are just in the first 6 ingredients. And then it also includes squalane, Centellia asiatica, milk thistle, ectoin, and then a few other ingredients that I also think are high quality. And it includes S-taxanthin, which is from algae, but which I, again, feel like has been good for my eyes and probably is a good thing for me to put on my skin as well as taking in a supplement form. And then in addition to all of those oils and other ingredients, it also includes a number of different herbs. And what they say is that the organic herbs and vitamin-rich oils keep skin super healthy and glowing. And it's made in the U.S. and it comes in a refillable glass bottle. And so if you buy the refill, you can save a little bit of money, not a lot. And according to the owner of the company, this includes micronized zinc, which is a small particle, but not nearly as small as the nano zinc. And the way that I found out about this sunscreen is that when I made that comment on Jen Phelps's YouTube video on sunscreens last year, the owner of the company read my comment and then she got in touch with me. And she seems to have about as much interest in this issue with regard to the sunscreen boosters as I do. And so she offered to send me this product as well as a couple other products from her company. So what I have to say about this product is that unfortunately it includes a chemical that is called phenethyl alcohol, and phenethyl alcohol is a ingredient that has a rose scent, so it actually is present in roses or rose extract, and then it also can be made in the laboratory. And the owner of the company told me that their version is a naturally derived version of phenethyl alcohol, and apparently this is used as a preservative. And so, for instance, Kosas uses phenethyl alcohol in a lot of their products, and I think that a lot of people probably do fine with that, but I seem to be quite allergic to both rose oil and also to phenethyl alcohol. And so if I put anything with phenethyl alcohol directly on my skin, then it does cause a bit of irritation. And as I say, I do have a zero tolerance policy with regard to any kind of irritation. And the scent of this product is pretty strong in my opinion. It does smell like roses, and so some people may find that to be appealing, and other people may prefer the product not to have any rose scent in it. And personally, I really like the scent of this product. I find that to be very appealing. I do like the smell of roses, but my skin does not like this phenethyl alcohol. I have found, though, that if I put a primer underneath it, so for instance, the Ilia Base Face Milk is enough of a primer to protect myself from a lot of mildly irritating ingredients that are in products, then I seem to be able to use this fine. And so if I put it directly on my facial skin, it can be just slightly irritating. But if I put down the Ilia Base Face Milk, or if I put down another primer that's a little bit even stronger, like for instance the Jane Iredale Hydrasheer foundation I use as a primer sometimes, and that would certainly be sufficient. But in any case, I have been able to use this fine if I put down that Ilia Base Face Milk first. And apart from that slight irritation, I think that this is really, really a lovely formula. In terms of how it performs, in terms of what it looks like on my skin, it really looks like I'm not wearing anything, even if I put quite a lot of it down. I think that it feels really good on my skin in terms of the moisturizing oils in it, and I think that it spreads out really easily, and it really doesn't look like I'm wearing anything at all except for skincare. And that is much better than most of the other sunscreens that I have tried, including all of the ones that I'm reviewing in this video. So I wish that it didn't have a phenethyl alcohol in it for me selfishly, but in terms of the performance of this, I am really, really impressed. And I did not find with this one that it irritated my eyes at all. My eyes seem to be fine with this one. And so I thought that I would talk briefly about the other two products that the company sent to me. And so the first one is called the Blissoma Pure Sensitive Care Complex. And so this is sort of like a serum or a milky type serum, and it is supposed to be helping your skin to become less sensitive and nourishing it. And I think that my skin is like this. I think it's responded well to it. I'm not sure if it's become less sensitive, but my skin has been in pretty good shape anyway. And I think partially because of the Dr. Barbara Sturm products that I've been using. And so it would be interesting to try this out for a while and to see if it made a big difference in terms of the sensitivity. But in any case, my skin does seem to be responding well to this one. Now, I will say with regard to this serum is that it does have a pretty strong scent of like licorice. So there is natural licorice in here and some other herbs. And so if you are bothered by that kind of scent, then that is definitely here. But I have found it to be quite pleasant, and I have not found this to be irritating at all. And then in addition, they sent me a cleanser, and the cleanser is called the Free Herbal Gel Cleanser and Makeup Remover. And so this one is a product that does not include any scent in it of any kind, and so I was happy about that. And it does include soap bark extract in it. And so soap bark is a cleanser that Lisa Eldridge uses in her cleanser, her makeup remover. And I have found that I really like that cleanser. And I actually really like this one also. And my skin seems to have done fine with this, and I have been using it more and more often, and I do really like it. And so I would consider buying this one again. And what I have found with this one is that it's supposed to be a makeup remover. And when it comes to removing, for instance, silicone makeup, I haven't found it to be all that great. But I do think when it comes to removing most of these sunscreens that this has been really ideal, because it is one that does help me to remove products that are a little bit on the greasy side and that are stuck to my skin pretty well, and it does it really easily without irritation. And so I think for this particular use, it's particularly nice. And so I have gotten to the point where when I've been putting sunscreen on my skin, I do tend to reflexively take it off with this. The other kinds of cleansers that I have been mostly using to take off sunscreen have been the Clinique Take the Day Off. This the doctorly people also recommended, and I do think that this one has been quite good in terms of easily getting off any kind of sunscreen, including ones with silicone in them. And then I still like this Pharmacy Honey Vanilla Clean, and I don't know how much longer they're going to be making this in the same formula, but this one has worked really, really well for me also. And the good thing I would say about all of these products, both the Blissoma one and the pharmacy one and the Clinique Take the Day Off one, is that I don't feel like I need to do a second cleanse after I use any of these other products. So I think that there are some other cleansers that would take these sunscreens off, but for the most part I do feel like I need to use a second cleanse with those. And then the next sunscreen that I have to talk about is this one from Bubble. And this is called the Bubble Plus One SPF 40, and it is $19. And so the cost per 1/4 teaspoon of this is 48 cents. And so compared to a lot of the sunscreens that I think are pretty much of equal quality, I think that this one is relatively reasonably priced. And so I think that that may make it attractive for many people. And in terms of the ingredients, it includes a few different ingredients that I think are actually quite high quality. So it includes cupuchu, seed butter, raspberry seed oil, and pomegranate extract, and then also some coconut derivatives in it. And it says that it has lily extract, which is supposed to mattify oil and balance acne-prone skin. And it is fragrance-free, and I do not notice any kind of a scent in here that I find to be noticeable at all and certainly not objectionable. And of the 30 sunscreens that Jen Phelps reviewed, she said that this was one of her top 3, and that this one, especially since it was a good value, is one that she intended to keep using. And I found a few people that did criticize this product online in their user reviews, and so some of the things that they said was that they didn't like the dark orange tint, that it burned their eyes, that it dried down too slowly, that they had an allergic reaction to it, and that it was too thick. And my experience with this product is that it does have a dark beige color, and I think that this was a good color for me. It might be a little too dark for some people or a little bit much too light for other people, but I feel like on my skin it was actually quite nice. And in addition, I feel like it dried pretty quickly for me. It does have a bit of a dewy finish, and so I think that it works better for me if I put a little bit of powder on the top of it, but that it really wasn't a big problem for me, and that it actually looks quite nice on my skin and that I actually appreciate that moisturizing on my own dry skin. And I don't think that this is the best sunscreen that I have found in terms of not exacerbating my wrinkles. For instance, I think that the Blissoma one is better with regard to that, but I don't think it was too bad. It's not so bad that it would make me not want to use it. And overall, I think that it has been pretty good for me, especially if we consider the price. And so this is one that I feel like I would continue to use, and I think that it's affordable enough that that is an incentive for me to consider buying it again. And then the next sunscreen that I have is from a company called Cocokind, and this is called the Daily SPF 30, and it is $25 for this tube. And so the zinc oxide in here is not stated as being non-nano, so it's probably a nano version. This does have a white color to it, but when it goes on the skin, I feel like it does rub in pretty well, and that it doesn't really look like it has a big white cast on my skin. But I can see how some people with darker skin than mine might have an issue with that. And Cocokind is a brand that is sold at Target and also at Ulta. and it's sort of a drugstore type of a brand, and so the cost for this one is fairly reasonable. It is 63 cents per quarter teaspoon, and so that is one that makes a little bit more sense for me to want to be able to use on a daily basis or to reapply multiple times. In terms of the ingredients in this, Cocokind is a line that tends to use a little bit better ingredients and more natural ingredients than most of the drugstore brands that are out there. And so some of the ingredients that are in this include some sunflower oil, shea butter, bisabolol, glycerin, aloe juice, argan oil, and some coconut derivatives. And it also has some spirulina in it, which is an algae, and that always makes me a little bit worried about contamination, and licorice extract. And personally, I have found that this has not irritated my skin at all and that it has been fine for me. And one of the people that I saw recommend this is the YouTuber Yvonne Burkhardt, who is a toxicologist. And so she seems to be interested more in products that are not too expensive, it seems, since she also recommended that Badger product. And some of the criticisms that I saw online were that it has a white cast, it burns the eyes, it's greasy, and it causes irritation, and that it's thick. And actually, Jen Phelps really disliked this one, and she said that she had difficulty rubbing it into her skin, that it felt sticky on her skin, and that she felt that makeup did not work well on top of it, and so she gave it a 1 out of 10. And so apparently her main goal in terms of finding a sunscreen is to use one that she can wear makeup on top. And personally, I did not try putting makeup on top of this one, and so I can't speak to whether or not it would work for me with regard to that. Now, my own experience with this is that it is a bright white color when it comes out of the tube, but that it actually blended into my skin a little bit better than I would have anticipated based on that, and that it was just a little bit white on my skin, and that is something that I feel like a bronzer or mixing a bronzer into the product, if I felt like that was an okay thing to do, that would be sufficient. And I would agree that if you have a darker skin tone, this probably wouldn't be a very good product because it does have that white cast to it. And with this one, I think that it might irritate my eyes a little bit, so I think that it is important for me to keep that out of my eyes. And so for some people, that would be a no-go for them, I would think. And I think that in general, other than that it performs pretty well for me, especially if you consider the low price, and that it is a little bit greasy, but that it's not too bad, and that it did eventually dry down into my skin, and that I thought that the finish was fine, and that I could use powder with it, and that helped a little bit, but that I didn't necessarily have to use that. And I feel like the smell was okay for me. So while I do think that there are some other products that I am trying today that I have liked better, that this one is a relatively reasonable price and that it works fairly well for me considering the price, and therefore that it could be a good option for some people. And then we have a product that Angie Hot and Flashy, who has a YouTube channel, says is one of her 2 favorite products of all time and that she made famous last year. And this is called the Healthy Skin Lab Protect SPF 50, and it is $43. So for a mineral-only sunscreen, I think that SPF 50 is quite high, and if you take into consideration how much protection that is giving you, I think that this one does perform fairly well, whereas a lot of sunscreens that are out there that have only minerals and also have that really high SPF, they do tend to be a little bit thick and to perform not very well, especially under makeup. And Angie does seem to wear makeup a lot, and so I think that that is one of the reasons that she really liked this one. And so what they say is that this has both non-nano zinc and non-nano titanium dioxide in it. And it also has several silicones in it, including a cyclic silicone called cyclopentasiloxane. And so I think that that makes it not eligible to be sold in Europe, to my understanding, but that it is not necessarily something that has irritated my skin when I've used it in other products before. And in addition, it has sodium hyaluronate and vitamin C in it. And this is called a tinted moisturizer, but I think unlike most products that are out there that are called tinted moisturizers, this one is not so highly pigmented that you would not want to use a full quarter teaspoon on your face. I think it is possible to use the full amount of this one and then to put another foundation over the top of it if you choose. And the cost per quarter teaspoon for this one is $1.08. And so I think this is kind of average for the higher quality products that I tried that I think would be a good one to wear on a daily basis. And the criticisms that I found of this product online were that it has a shiny or glowy appearance, that the pump can be annoying, that it is too dark, that it oxidizes into an orange color, that it burned their eyes, that it is greasy, and that it caused breakouts. So for me, my experience was definitely that this is quite a shiny product, and that maybe the reason that Angie doesn't mind it so much is because she's planning to use it under makeup, and so therefore having a product that's a little bit shiny like that can actually be attractive if you put it on underneath a foundation that works well with it. And for me, I'm not planning to wear the sunscreen under foundation. I'm just wearing it on its own. And so I do feel for me it was pretty much on the glowy side. And that although I can take it down a little bit with powder, that I do find that to be not so appealing to me. I do feel like the color was okay on my skin. I think it's a little bit more orange than some of the others, but my skin just seems to do okay with that. But I don't know how people that have a pale skin would do with it, especially if your skin's more pink. It might start to make you look a little bit orange, especially if you're not putting foundation over it. And I'm not sure it would be exactly great for people with really dark skin either. And I also found that compared to a lot of the products that I am talking about today, that this one did exacerbate the look of my wrinkles a bit. I don't think it was a no-go, but I think that it is more so than a lot of the other products. And I also feel like this one was a little bit irritating to my eyes, especially. I do feel like I agree with that commenter that said it made their eyes burn. And I don't think that it was so irritating to my skin that I wouldn't be able to wear it. And I do have a really zero tolerance policy. But I think that compared to a number of these other products, that this one is not quite as skin friendly for me as some of them. And I do think that this one is quite thick, and maybe more thick than I would prefer. And I think that it did dry down eventually, and so it was wearable, and that the thickness was not necessarily a problem, but it does go on pretty thick, and it does take a while to wear down. And so even though I know that some people do really like this one, not just Angie, but many of the people that bought it because Angie liked it so much, I would say that I doubt that I will finish this container, and eventually I may pass it on to someone that I know that does wear foundation more often, that might be able to get some more use out of it. But I think that for me, this is one of the ones that I am a little bit less happy with. And then the next product is from a company called Lion Pose. And this was started last year by a group of dermatologists. I think that they are somehow associated with Harvard Medical School. And so they've come out with a couple of products so far. And so this one used to be called Lion Pose Ghostbuster SPF 42. And now they have changed it to Unghosted. And I imagine that the reason for that is because of copyright, because of the movie. That would be my guess anyway. So now the name is Unghosted, but it still seems to be the same formula. And the cost is $39. It has 15% zinc oxide in it, and it is a non-nano zinc, but it is a new form of zinc that is supposed to not have a white cast, and that's why it's called Unghosted. And then it has some other ingredients in it that I think could be attractive, including cork oak bark extract. And this is an ingredient that I actually am a little bit interested in because it is in the literature as having some anti-wrinkling effects. And I have used it in another product that is no longer on the market, and I did feel like that was actually a good product. Those were products from Birkenstock, actually, which is not making skincare anymore. And then in addition, this has squalane and coconut derivatives and oak root extract and jojoba oil in it. So it does have some good skincare ingredients in it. And in terms of the scent, the only scent ingredient that is in this is cucumber extract. And I do feel like this smells strongly of cucumbers, and some people may find that to be okay. Some people did find it to be objectionable in terms of the comments that I saw. I thought that it was acceptable and that I could tolerate it. I wouldn't say that's my favorite scent, but it's been all right. And in terms of the price, it seems to be sort of right in the middle in terms of how much a really high quality sunscreen would cost, which is 98 cents per quarter teaspoon. And they are claiming that this also has some glutathione in it, and so that could be a positive thing also. And so this is a higher SPF. It is SPF 42, and so it is a thicker product, and it is thicker than some of the other products that I feel like I have used more and that I have liked more. And it is wearable, and I do think that it looks pretty good on my skin. It has a kind of a golden beige color to it, and I think that for me that is not too bad. But for some people, they are saying that it tends to look a little bit lavender on their skin if their skin is really dark, so that could be something to consider. And it does seem to be that the zinc is mostly transparent, though. And I did find the finish to be kind of dewy, and so I did put a little bit of powder down on the top of it, and I feel like that makes it dry a little bit faster and made it work a little bit better for me. So I think that for this one it is really kind of thick, and it's getting to the point where if I use the full quarter teaspoon or close to that on my skin, that it's really too much for me to want to use unless I really feel like I need the sun protection. And so therefore, I think that some of the ones with a lower SPF have worked better for me, and I'm more inclined to use them. Or if I was going to use this one, I would use less of it, which is maybe defeating the purpose. But in any case, I think that especially if you're looking for a high SPF, that this one could be a good choice. And in general, I think that it is a lot better in terms of usability than many of the sunscreens that were present on the market in the past. And so moving on, the next sunscreen that I have is one that is called Live Tinted Hueguard 3-in-1 Sunscreen SPF 30. This is $34. And do note that Live Tinted makes two different sunscreens. So this one does not have any sunscreen boosters in it, but they do also make a version that is, I believe, SPF 50, and that one does have a sunscreen booster in it. And so this particular one, it has zinc oxide at a level of 18%, and it has some coconut derivatives and sea buckthorn oil in it, so it is a little bit moisturizing. There are no scent ingredients in this. It is a kind of a beige type of a color, a little bit orangey, and I feel that it has worked okay on my skin. And the cost of this per quarter teaspoon is 85 cents. And I feel like for my skin in particular, this color has been fine, and I have been able to wear it pretty well. I do think that if you have dark skin, it might be too light for you, and it is a little bit on the orangey side, so it's possible that if you have really fair and cool skin that you might be seeing a little bit of oranginess from this. And this was one of the 3 sunscreens that Jen Phelps said that she liked the best. She said, and I agree, that this is quite a lot like the sunscreen from Bubble in terms of the performance and in terms of how it looks on the skin. And so I think that this is a very nice sunscreen. It's a little bit more expensive than the Bubble sunscreen, but I think that it is a good option also. And Jen said that she did not believe this one to be greasy. She said that she was able to wear this easily over her regular moisturizer, even though it wasn't that moisturizing herself. And she said that for her it worked well under makeup. And so she gave that a 10 out of 10 on her scale. And the criticisms that I see about this sunscreen online, some people said that on dark skin that it did have a bit of a white cast. Some people said that it pilled for them, and a couple of people I saw said that it caused irritation or that it was sticky, and also that it might not look as good as it could on mature skin. And I feel like for me that it looked pretty natural on my skin, and it did have a dewy finish when I put it down. I didn't really feel like it was that sticky, but I do think it helped me to put a little bit of a powder on top of this to keep it from being quite as sticky feeling. And I don't notice any kind of a smell that seemed noticeable to me, or certainly I didn't find it to be objectionable. And I think that it did not exacerbate the look of my wrinkles too much. And so this is one of those that I am personally willing to wear. And then the next sunscreen is from Naked Sundays, and this is an Australian company, and the name of this sunscreen is the Collagen Glow SPF 50, and it is $25 for this tube. And so the cost per quarter teaspoon is 63 cents, so it is a little bit less expensive than some of the other sunscreens that I have been liking. And it has a zinc level of 23%, non-nano zinc, and some of the other ingredients in this include baobab oil, coconut derivatives, and watermelon seed oil. And it does not have any scent ingredients in it. And I would say that compared to really all of the other sunscreens that I'm talking about in this video, this one is actually quite a bit thicker, and it is also quite moisturizing. And so it goes on the skin sort of like a really very thick and very moisturizing nighttime cream. And so not everyone may like that, and I didn't feel like this was necessarily one that I was going to want to wear during the day when I first put it on. But I do feel like if I allow it to dry down, and it does take a while to dry down, that it actually works out pretty well on my face. And once it actually does get dry, that it actually would even maybe work under makeup, and in any case it works pretty well for a daytime sunscreen, and especially one that is SPF 50. So generally speaking, when you're getting into that level, you're getting an awfully lot of zinc in it if you're not putting any sunscreen boosters in it. And so I think that considering what a high SPF this one has, I do think that it is performing pretty well. And so I can see why a lot of people like this one. This is one that I had some people in the comments section on my YouTube channel said that they did like this one and that they wanted me to try this one out. And so I can kind of see why that is, because if you're looking for a really high SPF, this is actually one that is more wearable than really most of the other ones that have a high SPF like that, as far as I've found. And another person on YouTube whose channel I watch pretty often is Tamara's Timeless Beauty, and she said that this was her favorite SPF for outdoor activities and that she does wear it pretty often. I think that she said that she does not wear this one in conjunction with makeup, but that she wears it a lot just to protect her face from the sun when she really needs that kind of protection. And Jen Phelps also reviewed this product, and she gave it a 6.5 out of 10, and what she said was that this had a thick clay texture, that she could feel it on her skin. She did say that it blended in relatively easily, but that it felt heavily and sticky, and although she could wear makeup over it, it did take a while longer to dry down, and that it wasn't really her preferred formula, but that it nonetheless did perform pretty well, especially considering how thick and sticky it went on. And in terms of the criticisms that I have seen from users, people say that it is thick, that it can irritate their skin or their eyes, that some people actually said that they thought it was drying. I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, a lot of people complained about the basic issues with this one, which is that it dries down very slowly and that it may leave a little bit of a white cast, especially if your skin is very dark, and that it is really greasy because of all those oils in it. And I personally would say that this was more wearable than I would have imagined, and that once it did dry down, it actually was really comfortable on my skin. I don't personally find that it was irritating for me at all, and I think it looked okay. I don't think it exacerbated the look of my wrinkles, and I don't think it gave my skin that much of a white cast. And so basically with this one, I think you need to put some on, wait a little bit, put some more on if you want to put on the full quarter teaspoon, and you need to be prepared to wait 5 or 10 minutes to let it dry down. And personally, I would not be planning to put much makeup over this. But if I was planning to go out and be in the sun and play volleyball or tennis or something like that, I think this could be a good choice for it. I think it would give you a lot of protection. And then last year I did a full video on the entire line of products from Necessaire, and so one of those products is the sunscreen from Necessaire, and this is Mineral SPF 30, and they are mostly recommending this as a body sunscreen, but they do say that it is appropriate for use on the face as well. And so this is SPF 30, and it is $45 for this large container of it, which is 5.1 fluid ounces. So this is quite a lot of product. And on terms of the cost per 1/4 teaspoon, if you were going to use it on your face, it is 38 cents. And so I think that probably very few people would buy this one just to use on their face because it is such a large container. But if you are planning to use this on your body, then it is appropriate, I think, to use it on your face, although I don't think that this is performing as well as a lot of the other sunscreens in terms of being one that you would want to wear, for instance, just to go throughout your day, and especially I don't think you would want to put makeup on the top of this one. And so there is quite a bit of zinc oxide in this one. It is 20% zinc oxide. And then in addition, in terms of the moisturizing ingredients, it contains coconut derivatives, squalane, glycerin, shea butter, sodium hyaluronate, niacinamide, and bisabolol. And so in general, compared to many of the other sunscreens out there, it does have a lot of moisturizing content. And I think that that is fine for my body. I actually think that is pretty good. And even in the summertime, I do feel like this absorbs into my body pretty well. And it's basically almost like just putting moisturizer on my body. And so I am happy about that. And in terms of my face, I just think that it is kind of similar to the Badger formula, that I don't think it's irritating to my skin at all, and I don't think that it's problematic to put it on my face. It just is quite greasy, and so therefore you can just need to be prepared for that. And in terms of the user reviews, the main things that I have seen people complain about is that it has a white or a gray cast and that it is thick and oily. And some people, very few, say that they don't like the smell of this. It doesn't have any fragrance in it at all. And I think that the fragrance has been fine for me, and I am very picky, but apparently not everyone in the world agrees with that. And some people say that it does pill, and I could see that it might pill if you used it in conjunction with the wrong kinds of other products. And for me, I think that this is a product that I would use mostly on its own, and then I would use maybe just a little bit of creamy bronzer or something like that in conjunction with it to give myself a little bit of color. But I really wouldn't try to be using it in conjunction with any kind of makeup that really might not play well with it. And so overall, I actually have been using this on my arms from time to time, and I do think that it has worked really nicely for that, and it is pretty economical even when I'm using it on a larger area of my body. And so I do really, really like this one. And I think that both in terms of the cost and in terms of the functionality, it seems to be in the same category as the Badger in my mind. And then the next product is from a company called St. Jane, and so this is called the Luxury Sun Ritual Pore Smoothing SPF 30, and this is available at Sephora, and it is $38 for this tube. And so on a cost per 1/4 teaspoon, this is 95 cents, so I feel like this is kind of average. And I think the thing to know about this one is that it does contain some silicones in it, and it also does contain nanoparticle zinc, it seems, or I haven't been able to find any evidence that this is non-nano zinc. And so what I think about this one in particular is that if you're looking for a sunscreen that will work well under makeup, and particularly under silicone foundation, then I think that this one could be a really good one to choose. In my experience, I actually have tried this one out under a variety of different foundations, both silicone foundation and non-silicone foundation. And I do feel like this has worked quite well for me, sort of across the board. And there is one person on YouTube who really does like this one quite a lot, and that she seems to wear foundation on a regular basis. This is Morgan Turner. And so she said last year that she started out the summer wanting to find a sunscreen that would work really well for her under the foundation that she always wore, and that this one has been really good for her. And this also was one of the sunscreens that Jen Phelps thought were among her top 3. And she says that this has a thin lotion-like texture, that it blended right into her skin, and that it really felt to her like she was putting on a foundation makeup primer rather than just a sunscreen, and that for her it did not have any white cast, and that her skin felt smooth, and that her makeup applied nicely. And so she gave that one a 10 out of 10. And so I was happy to hear that, because by that point I had already evaluated this in another review of my own, and my experiences with this one were very similar to that this one did perform really well on my skin, and that even though it does have some silicones in it, I don't feel like it was incredibly difficult to get off as long as I was using just one of my regular makeup removers, and that in general my skin really did seem to like this one. And even though it does have a little bit of a scent to it. So the scent that's in this, it's not an essential oil or a processed natural fragrance. It's more like extracts. And so the extracts that are in here are jasmine extract, hibiscus extract, desert rose extract, and green tea extract. And I do feel like it has a little bit of a floral scent to it, and so that did make me nervous a little bit. But it actually seemed to be fine on my skin. I don't think that it was irritating for me at all, and I actually found the scent to be pleasant, but it is a floral type of a scent. And in terms of the other ingredients that are in here that are more moisturizing, it does have some coconut oil derivative and olive oil derivative, and then there's that silicone that's in it. So I tend not to wear silicone products on my face every day. I tend to prefer not to do that. I think that my skin doesn't do quite as well if I'm using silicone products on my face on a regular basis. But I think that this one performs well enough that I think it's an okay product for me to wear on its own. And certainly if there is a time that I want to wear a sunscreen under a foundation, this one would for sure be the one that I would pick. In terms of the criticisms that I have seen in the user reviews, people sometimes say that it separates. I have kind of shaken it up when I have used it, so I haven't noticed that as being an issue. People do mention on occasion that there is a strong scent to it. Some people with oily skin said that that did not work very well for them. And then a few other comments. Some people said that it was runny. Some people said that it was patchy. I did read 1 or 2 comments of people that said that it irritated their skin or their eyes. And I feel like it's been okay for me with regard to that, but some people did have issues with that. And then some people do say that it's not good for their dark skin. And I didn't see that many reports for that. And I do think that compared to many of the sunscreens that are out there, that this one, because it has the nano zinc in, it's a bit more transparent, but it apparently could be an issue for people with dark skin, as most zinc-based sunscreens are. The other couple things I will say about this one, I feel like compared to some of the sunscreens that I tried out, that this one did dry pretty quickly on my skin, so I was happy about that. And I don't feel like it was exacerbating the texture on my skin either as much as some of these. I feel like my wrinkles pretty much look the same as always when I put this on rather than looking worse. And I would say with this one, although I didn't really have any issues with it irritating my skin, I still feel enough doubtful about it if I were going to be wearing it on a regular basis that probably I would want to wear it over something like the Ilia-based face milk, because I think that would provide a little bit of protection. But if I did wear it over something like that, I think that this would be pretty good for me in terms of something I could wear regularly. And then the last product that I have to talk about may well still be my very favorite, and this is from the Outset, and this is called Hydrasheer SPF 30, and it is $44, which makes it $1.10 per quarter teaspoon. And I do feel like in general, as far as skincare products go, that this may be my favorite skincare brand. And I think in terms of trying to find products that are really good for sensitive skin and that you can kind of rely upon not to be irritating for many people, I think that this is a really, really good brand. And I think that that is the case with this sunscreen as well as with the other products that they make. And this is the brand from Scarlett Johansson, and I did do a full review of this product last year, as well as a review of all of the products from the Outset. And the marketing director from the Outset told me that she was going to let Scarlett Johansson know about my video from last year so she could watch it on the location filming for Jurassic Park, which is going to come out next month, so I'm kind of excited to watch that movie. And in terms of this sunscreen, this has a bunch of ingredients in it that I do think are good for the skin, including argan oil and niacinamide and snow mushroom extract and sunflower oil and bissable oil and ceramide. And it does not have any scent ingredients, and in general, I think that like other products from the Outset, the ingredient list looks really good, and my skin has done really well with this product. And so far, I have only seen this product for sale on the Outset website. All of the other products from the Outset seem to be for sale on Sephora, but I don't see this sunscreen there. And I did look through the reviews on the Outset website, and I'm not seeing any that are critical of it, at least not yet. And in terms of the type of zinc that's in this, this is supposed to have that new type of a zinc in it, so it's not a nanoparticle, but it is supposed to not have a white cast. So I think it may be the same sort of zinc that is in, for instance, the Lion Pose formula. And in general, I think that this has been really terrific for me. It does come out of the tube looking white, but I don't think that it looks white on my skin. And I don't know if it for sure would be okay for people, regardless of how dark their skin is. But I do think that for me, it's not making my skin look darker. And other things that I will say about this one is that it's a little bit thinner than many of the other sunscreens that are out there. It's almost a little bit runny. So it's just SPF 30, so it's not as high as that Lion Pose one. And so therefore it's a little bit better behaved, but that they are still getting the advantage of having this really high quality and more transparent form of the zinc. And personally, I don't feel like it has that heavy zinc feeling as much as many of these other products that are out there, and I think it feels more like just being a moisturizer. I don't know that I would really choose to use this as a moisturizer rather than something else if I didn't have a sunscreen benefit to it, but I do think that it's leaning more into being more like skincare and less feeling like an SPF than many of the other products that I've tried. And it does go on slightly dewy, but I don't necessarily feel that I need to use powder under it. I do feel like it dries down to the point that it's okay pretty quickly. And I have tried using this under some different foundations. I haven't tried it under every foundation that I own, but I have tried it under several foundations. And I do think that it's worked fine for me under the foundations. I think that that St. Jane product might be a bit better, but in terms of wearability under a foundation, I think it's been okay. And especially if you're looking for a sunscreen that is non-nano to wear under a foundation, I think that this one could be a really good choice. And when I look back over the footage of me putting this on, I haven't really noticed in person that the product has looked like it has made my skin look worse or has looked like it has exacerbated my wrinkles. I feel like in the footage it might be exacerbating my wrinkles a little tiny bit, but I don't feel like it has been substantial, and it's not something that would make me not want to wear it. And just as an update in terms of other products from the Outset, I did notice today that they have reformulated their night cream, and so I am looking forward to trying out the new version of this. I thought that the old version was okay for me, but I am wondering if this new version might be one that I would like more, so I will be trying that out soon. And then in addition, today on the Outset website, I saw a video with Scarlett Johansson talking about her experiences on location making the Jurassic Park movie and about how stressful that was for her skin and about the Outset products that she used to cope with that. And in addition, they have a special promotion where they have a toiletry case that is similar to the costume that she wore in the movie, along with some Outset products. And I think that that looks kind of fun, so I may pick that up myself. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video, and I hope that of the options that I brought up, that some of those might be interesting for you, or if there are other sunscreens that you have tried out that have worked out for you, then please do let me know what those are in the comments section so that I can give those a try too. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And if you like the video, then please do hit like, because that helps the algorithm supposedly. And Coco and I do love you very much, and so I hope that everything is going well for you. Goodbye.
La ba da la 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 bum